Says again. Hi, everybody. I'm David Gregg, and we're here today with Michael Andranovich. And Michael is a MESM student at the University of Rhode Island. It's a master's in environmental science and management. And the Natural History Survey was approached by Brett Still, who is the coordinator of the MESM program at URI, to see if we could help coordinate funding for Michael to work on a research project, an internship for the last, I think you've been working on it for 6 months anyway, to study the impacts of marine plastics on seabirds. And I thought it sounded like a really cool project, just the kind of thing that the Natural History Survey should be able to help make happen. And we were able to make it happen. I thought it would be really cool. I'm sure most of the people watching this have no idea that this project was taking place. So they'll be interested to know that this is a project that's been going on and to hear a little bit about what you're finding. I know that you're not entirely finished with it, but I think people would really be interested to hear about this project, how it's gone. So I'm going to hand it over to Michael and we'll get going.
The Rhode Island Natural History Survey presents videos to showcase the animals, plants, geology, and natural systems that surround us, and the people and organizations working to understand and conserve them.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching today. My name is Michael Andranovich, and I want to thank David for helping us record this. So the research project I've been working on is identifying impacts of marine debris on birds in the Gulf of Maine and northeastern United States. This project included a lot of partnerships. I tried to put logos up at the top here, including NOAA Marine Debris Program, the University of Rhode Island, where I go to school, Rhode Island Natural History Survey, these guys right here, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So a little bit about the project background. My official title on this project is Student Research Assistant for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Migratory Birds Division in the Northeast region. Although my title carries a U.S. Fish and Wildlife designation, this opportunity was created by a partnership between all those folks on that title page, and funding and outreach were leveled by a whole different set of partnerships. To understand what my role is and what I'm doing, it's important to first talk about how it all started, and that's going to be the Gulf of Maine Marine Debris Action Plan. So this plan is a coordinated effort headed by the NOAA Marine Debris Program, who partnered with dozens of other agencies and organizations to study the magnitude and impacts that marine debris causes in the Gulf of Maine. For this purpose of this plan, the Gulf of Maine is defined as Cape Cod, Massachusetts, to the coasts of New Hampshire, Maine, and the Canadian provinces of New Brunswick and Cape Sable, Nova Scotia. My role as a research was really created as a response to strategy 1.1, which is down there at the bottom of the slide. Assess marine debris risks to wildlife and habitat. It's a major component of the 5-year plan. And as I've learned on this project, the severity and the impacts of marine debris on birds, it's not really well known in the northeastern United States. So this project aims to better understand the impacts and threats, as well as identify information gaps where future research could help. One last note on why this research falls to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Their jurisdiction really starts with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 and the Endangered Species Act, which gives them regulatory responsibility for those species of birds that are listed, especially when considering the protection of birds at sea. So the objectives for this project in its current phase, which began in May, as David talked about, was 5 objectives that I've kind of listed here. Obviously, the objectives are very, very long, so I tried to cut them down as much as I could. But the first objective is to identify the threats from marine debris to birds in the Gulf of Maine. This objective was completed via literature review to compile as much information as I could find in published literature, technical reports, gray works. Secondly, we wanted to engage partners who work directly with marine debris or birds to document their experiences. During the planning for this objective, we created a list of partners from a wide swath of areas, not just bird sanctuary managers, in the hopes of creating a more well-rounded final document. The third and fourth objectives were kind of grouped together in a lot of ways. First, we wanted to identify the information gaps for better understanding the impacts, which would obviously better inform future work in this field. And Secondly, we wanted to use the literature and partner interactions to aid in collecting broad strategies and partner networks to find as many partners as we could to work on this. Lastly, of course, we have to report our findings. There's no point in doing all this research if we can't bring it to someone. So we want to report all of our findings, as well as create some really cool deliverables, not only for bird managers and NOAA, but for the general public as well. This was an especially important objective for me, not only as a scientist, but I'm also an educator. And I want to be able to communicate these findings with an everyday person, right? So they become more engaged with this effort in combating marine debris. So to complete that first objective, identifying threats and impacts, we completed this via a literature review like I talked about. I compiled and reviewed over 100 published papers, technical reports, and this report is counting, this number is counting every day. New papers are coming out seemingly monthly. So even though I finished the majority of this review in September, I'm still reading a few papers a week, trying to make sure this document has every piece of information I can really scratch out. I used publication searches like Google Scholar, ResearchGate, ScienceDirect, as well as papers that were sent to me from my partners. While I was considering this, conducting this literature review, I discovered that there wasn't a ton of information specifically in the Gulf of Maine and this Northeast region that really contains Rhode Island too. And there definitely wasn't information on marine debris and seabirds. So this showed me that my work that I'm doing is important, but I also needed to incorporate some information from other geographic regions, both in the United States and around the globe. That next objective was the partner inquiry. To complete this second objective, I created a partner inquiry to disseminate a wide range of people. Starting with the contacts I received first from the NOAA Marine Debris Program. That list kind of just grew and grew and grew. It's probably over 70, 75 partners at this point. And with this inquiry, we targeted biologists, NGOs, seabird managers, marine debris scientists, both in the United States and Canada, as well as partners from the fishing industry, the lobster industry. From these communications, we collected information about interactions between seabirds, marine debris. We were mostly looking for unpublished documents, photos, data sets, and even those anecdotal accounts from people who maybe work on a boat and have seen the impacts of marine debris. You know, even if it never got published, these are all important accounts. Just an important side note too, the inquiry is an ongoing section of this project. So if you're watching this video, I think your organization has some information to contribute. I implore you to contact me. I left my contact information there at the bottom, and it's going to be on this video a few different times. We have a really good response rate, but we're always looking for more input. So feel free to send me an email. And if you're watching this and you've already participated, I'd just like to take a moment to thank you again, because the information you've sent is going right in the report. It's incredibly important. Third objective is information gaps. So like I said before, there wasn't a ton of published information to pull from. Because of that, this information gap section will be one of the most important in the final product. Although some suggestions came from other regional documents, most gaps have been identified through partner interactions, specifically through this partner inquiry on the last slide. An overall theme of the responses revolved around the concept of just generally increasing efforts, because we want to find accurate estimates of birds affected. Some more specific examples I tried to list here to give everyone an idea of what response managers are saying. So we want to understand the impacts of ghost fishing and net entanglements of birds. We want to, partners want to conduct a general survey of microplastics in the water column. Lastly, they want to identify mostly where this marine debris comes from. We don't really have a lot of information. You know, is it mostly from boats? Is it mostly from land? So that's all important research that we hope to fill in the future. That next objective is about strategies. And similar to the information gap section, most of these suggested strategies are to target those impacts, and they came via partner interactions. Currently, we've broken the strategies up into 3 main areas, which you guys can see here. That first one is addressing derelict fishing gear through regulation change and identification. The next one would be reducing consumer litter through legislation and increased volunteer engagement. And that third one would be engaging community scientists to proliferate data in these understudied areas. So going back to the top, derelict fishing gear, it can be described as recreational or commercial fishing gear that is intentionally or unintentionally lost at sea and kind of remains floating out there. This gear can include fishing nets, fishing lines, fish boxes, crab and lobster pots, oyster nets, the strings, package bait, and even the rubber gloves. Anything in the aquaculture world that you can think of can end up, unfortunately, becoming derelict fishing gear. Reducing consumer litter is really important too, especially through single-use plastic. Think plastic bags, plastic straws, plastic cutlery from restaurants, that all these things that you use once, as well as balloons. We really want to target through some legislation that's happened in surrounding states and regions. And lastly, we understand that research funding for these projects can be extremely limited, as most science projects it can be. So we really want to encourage community science projects, or to encourage more people to participate in community science projects, because we can gain information and engage the public with our findings both at the same time. Some great local community science programs, I just want to give a couple of shout outs here that have proven successful, are the Seabird Ecological Assessment Network, CNET, and Surfrider Foundation. So without giving too much of the report away, as David talked about, it's not a finished product at this point, but some of the findings I didn't want to leave everybody out. So specifically in the Gulf of Maine, the major types of marine debris we found, obviously derelict fishing gear, specifically lobster pots and fish netting. We found that consumer litter, especially during tourist seasons, contribute a lot of marine debris to the region. We're talking plastic bottles, cigarette butts, even food packaging, because obviously the Gulf of Maine has a huge tourist industry, and that's very important to the region, but it also brings a lot of people in. And industrial litter, which can kind of be talked about as like plastic strapping or the packaging that a lot of items come in. Those major impacts are the major impacts of marine debris on seabirds we found were entanglement, also ghost fishing, which is the idea that the fishing gear, once lost, doesn't stop fishing, right? So we have birds that eat via diving, they go below the surface, they can get caught in this marine debris, become entangled, and unfortunately die. Another major impact is ingestion, and this is done both directly and through secondary consumption. There's a lot of cool studies out there showing the bioaccumulation effects of birds eating some prey, and the prey had plastic in it, so now the bird has plastic in it. The bird in turn is going to go feed its young, and you pass the plastic and its nasty effects onto there. And a third impact is kind of a general one. It's called alteration of the nesting habitat, right? So this includes not only the incorporation, so that's when a bird brings plastic or marine debris into its nest and kind of weaves it in, which increases entanglement chances. Increased marine debris also increases predation, right? So it attracts more predators to nesting spaces if they incorporate it. It also just generally reduces space, right? Marine debris takes up a lot of space for these already kind of shrinking breeding areas. So it's really important to get more research done here and see if we can kind of target these impacts. So this is an important slide here. Final products, right? So what's our end game? Why are we writing all these things? I kind of alluded to it a little, but so using information gathered from a literature review and partner interactions, I've been crafting a summary report, which will benefit both partners and the general public. The first draft of the summary report, which we're calling version 1.1, is going to be reviewed by NOAA personnel by the end of the year. And then we're going to go from there, right, to a much more polished, probably end of spring, early summer. Outside of the summer report, though, we've created some really fun extra deliverables that will also benefit the future of this project. I've listed them here. These extra deliverables include a full reference list beyond the references I've cited in the report with some annotations as a bibliography. These extra pieces of reference will help future researchers who may want to start investigating marine debris and its impacts, but they don't know where to start. So by including every paper I read with a little kind of description about why it's important, it may encourage more people to kind of get engaged in this research. The report's also going to feature an appendix to include impacted seabird species based just in the Gulf of Maine. So these are species that are common here. They might migrate through here. They might live here full time. But I've compiled from a few different literature papers to really put this chart together. And then lastly, we're in the process of compiling a list of relevant data sets and impact photos from partners, which can be viewed by the public too. And that's really important because a lot of people have these data sets or these photos, and they don't really have a central place to host them. So we're trying to do a really good job of collecting as much of that as we can and be able to share it. So our intention is to host all these products on the NOAA Marine Debris Program website or similar partner website for easier access in the future. So after this phase is reviewed, right, NOAA gets the paper in their hands, they review it, we go a little back and forth. Here's some really important next steps we're trying to compile. So after completing the current phase of the project, we plan on taking this even further with some additional funding in the spring and summer. Currently, we have a plan of organizing and conducting a partner webinar in early 2021. The purpose of this webinar to present really the main findings, the results of the report, to develop some actions to implement strategies and fill these information gaps we talked about. It's really about engaging partners from different branches, right? So it's about getting a manager from a bird sanctuary in Maine or a fisher from Massachusetts and bring them into the same room to see what kind of partnerships we can form. After the completion of what we hope to be a successful webinar and meeting, I'll incorporate the information and some extra partner follow-ups into the final report. Along with the webinar, we hope to continue to work with the NOAA Marine Debris Program to compile funding sources for research and implementing the strategies. That's an important step too. With all these added steps to the next phase of the project, we hope to deliver a final summer report with those extra deliverables available to the public, as I said before, late spring, early summer of 2021. And this kind of third bullet here is really important. Just as a final note here, even though I've been granted this opportunity, right, I've been working on this project closely, really deeply care about it. I'm not going to last forever, right? Eventually, my internship will end, but this project will continue to be worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife through the Gulf of Maine Marine Debris Action Plan. So if you're watching this years down the road, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Division of Migratory Birds is going to take this project and keep running with it. So they're important people to contact. Last slide here, just some shout outs and acknowledgements. I want to give special thanks to the University of Rhode Island again, Rhode Island Natural History Survey, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Migratory Birds Program, and the NOAA Marine Debris Program for making this opportunity possible. I also want to give shout outs to my U.S. Fish and Wildlife mentors on this project, Pam and Caleb, as well as my project managers from the NOAA Marine Debris Program, Demi Fox and Christy Kehoe. And then lastly, I want to just thank everyone who participated in the partner inquiry, everyone who's answered my hundreds of emails that I've sent out, asking for videos and data sets and photos, information. All these partner interactions are really what makes this report such a well-rounded document. So I think all the partners, a round of applause for you guys for being able to get this information to me so we can start putting it to use. And of course, lastly, I want to thank you, David, for giving me this opportunity to do a little video and kind of inform the public about what I think is a pretty cool project that's come down the pipeline here.
So. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I have a few questions, if you don't mind. So I guess the first thing that occurs to me is say a little bit about the relevance. So you've done this research in the Gulf of Maine, but one of the outcomes of this is really for people all around to start to understand. I think people understand that marine debris is a problem, but that's a pretty broad topic. So you're helping to focus on, the things that are the most significant or areas where we might have the most leverage. And those lessons are valuable outside of the Gulf of Maine.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So again, this is a document on a pretty small region when you consider it worldwide scale. But we hope to use it, as a guiding document. It's one of the first of its kind in the country. So we're hoping other managers read our version of it, understand that their region has its own special quirks, and they can kind of craft their own summer report that still gets this major research out there. Yeah.
So the other cool thing about this research, and the thing that I was really interested in, one of the reasons I thought the survey should get involved, is the idea of collecting anecdotal evidence. So, when you first start, let's say you identify a research problem, marine debris, huge broad topic. there's nothing more expensive than boat time. So before you launch into, a project like marine debris and just start sending scientists willy-nilly everywhere in boats and helicopters and what have you, you really got to chop the problem down to size. And where do you start? You don't have systematic data to start with, because you don't know where to go first. So you start with a literature review and collecting this anecdotal information. So a lot of times anecdotes get looked down on in science, but it's where you start. You always start with anecdote. That's how you start. So can you say a little bit about how that is valuable, and where that's taken you?
Yeah, I mean, when we first crafted these objectives for the project, you're exactly right. Anecdotal evidence doesn't always get the respect it probably deserves, but without it, we wouldn't know that a problem exists, right? You need to get your boots on the ground, and really talk to those people who work with this problem, whether it's marine debris or with seabirds every day. So even though, I read over 100 technical papers with, a lot of terms in it, things like that, it's not a full substitute for actually talking to a sanctuary manager or a fisher or anything like that, and really get their experience, so that, like you said, we know there's a problem, other people think it's a problem, and where we can really focus our attention.
Yeah. And then one of the questions I had was, you talked about some of the sources of marine debris with, fishing, aquaculture, tourism, I guess balloons, they blow in from outside. But it kind of made me think, are there major sources of debris that are from outside our control? So how much marine debris drifts in with currents? And I know the Gulf Stream makes it quite a bit different context south of Cape Cod than north of Cape Cod, but are there external sources of debris in the Gulf of Maine, or were you able to find any information about that?
Again, yeah, that's a really cool point. In the paper, I try and really focus on the idea that it's one interconnected ocean, right? So even though, there's oceans and seas with different names, really, like you talked about, the currents, everything is connected. So that's why it was important to look at regions that were close to the Gulf of Maine, right? Whether it be in Canada or across the Atlantic, and see what their marine debris problems are too, because eventually those things are going to move around, and they're going to end up in the Gulf of Maine. So.
Right. So that's not something that's something that you definitely were thinking about.
Yes, absolutely.
And then when we were talking about this, earlier, you had mentioned, maybe, I guess it's a sort of follow-on research, but how there might be areas that are worse than others for ghost fishing. Places like, once you start doing a literature review, you don't just chop the research topics down to size, but also the geographical area, and you can start to focus. The problems aren't uniform across the whole Gulf of Maine. There are areas of focus, and I thought that point about ghost fishing was interesting. I wondered if you could say a word about that.
Yes, I mean, even though the Gulf of Maine, like we talked about, on a broad scale, at a worldwide scale, isn't a large region. Each section of the region are their own little part, right? So when you look at Maine as a state, they have hundreds of those islands that pop up off the shore, that are difficult to get to and clean the marine debris from. You look at Massachusetts, right, with Cape Cod, and they have their own set of issues, with the inlet on the inside bay. So yeah, we're through partner interactions. Obviously, the literature wasn't super helpful on that, but partner interactions have led us to try and find those targeted areas of where we think the ghost fishing occurs, the most. There's a lot of cool research projects right now with drones in the region. So hopefully in a few years, that'll take off, where they can kind of do area flyovers and using a little bit of LiDAR, hope to find, below the surface, if they can see that there's certain areas where gear accumulates, things like that.
That's really cool. So this is really neat. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your research, and we'll look forward to the final report and to the extent that the Natural History Survey can help facilitate ongoing communication among partners and dissemination of your research beyond the Gulf of Maine to Rhode Island Sound and coastal waters, I'd be really excited to help out.
Yeah, and again, thank you for letting me do this, get this information out to the public. Just one last note, for anyone watching this video, would love to get involved. Again, the partner inquiry, we're looking for organizations rather than individual accounts. But if you think you have photos, things like that to share that happen in the Gulf of Maine, feel free. My email will be attached with this video. And really the end goal of all this is to just encourage more people to get involved. So, volunteer to clean the beach or engage yourself in a community science project and learn a little bit more about the ins and outs. And all that is going to be helpful towards the future of getting rid of these impacts, targeting these impacts. So.
Great. All right. Thanks very much. Well,
Natural History Survey videos are made possible through the generous contributions of members and friends. Want to help us do more environmental science and conservation? Hit the like button, share our videos with your circle, subscribe, or make a financial contribution on our website, ranhs.org, or through Patreon. Thanks, and see you out there.